Hello, today we're going to take a look at Chapter 11, Section 2, which is going to talk about some of the early Russian history and a little bit of intermingling with the Vikings, and then also at the end, how Russia was taken over by the Mongols and then broke free. So we'll start with Russia's birth, a little bit of geography. There are two important maps from the textbook, page 299 and also page 308. But Russia originated west of what is called the Ural Mountains, and also between the Black and Baltic Seas. To the south of this region is dry grassland, and to the north is dense forest, very flat and very swampy land also. There were three major rivers that sort of centered Russian civilization. Those are the Dnieper, the Don, and the Volga. Point number 3 mentions that in the 800s, Vikings known as the Rus swept down from the north and settled into what are called the Slavic lands. Therefore, the name Russia comes from this Viking group known as the Rus. Let's go ahead and take a look at the map of the Viking invasions. Obviously, the Vikings come from Scandinavia here and this region here. This is the Dnieper River, this is the Don, and this is the Volga. All of these rivers allowed the Vikings inlets into the area of Russia. This is sort of early Russia, is known as Kievan Russia, just north of the Black Sea right here, and located in between the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. So this is sort of the area right here. Modern day Ukraine really is where Russia sort of originates. Okay, next we'll talk about how the Slavic peoples that were there already and the Vikings sort of intermingled. Legend has it that the Slavs actually invited the Viking chief of the time, Rurik, to be their king. In 862, Rurik founded the city of Novgorod, which was Russia's first important city. Around 880, a nobleman named Oleg moved from Novgorod to a city called Kiev, which was situated on the Dnieper River. From Kiev, the Vikings could sail by river and sea to Constantinople, where they could then trade for products from other areas of the world. Vikings then intermarried with Slavic peoples, and eventually they became a unified culture. Let's talk about religion. Kiev eventually is going to become Orthodox. Kiev was first known as a principality, which is a small state ruled by a prince. In the year 957, a princess named Olga, who was a member of the Kievan nobility, went to Constantinople in a travel and publicly converted to Byzantine Christian. From 945 to 964, Princess Olga actually governed Kiev until her young son was old enough to rule. Her son, Sviatoslav, actually resisted Christianity. However, her grandson over time eventually did convert. He was known as Vladimir. Vladimir eventually came to be the ruler of Kiev in 980. He sent teams out to gather information about the three major religions of the time. Those three major religions were Islam, Judaism, and of course Christianity. Now with Christianity, you had Roman Catholic and you also had Byzantine or Orthodox Christianity. After receiving the reports back, Vladimir decided to convert to Byzantine Christianity and also ordered that all of his subjects from Kiev convert as well. In the year 989, all citizens of Kiev were baptized in the Dnieper River. Next, let's go down and talk about Roman numeral 2, Kiev's or Kievan power and decline. Kievan Russia under Vladimir expanded to the west into the region of Poland, what is now Poland, and north all the way to the Baltic Sea. They did have to defend attacks coming from the steppe region. There's a lot of nomadic groups that traveled across the steppes and tried to attack Russia. The steppes are sort of just to the east of the Black Sea. Yaroslav the Wise was next in power. He was Vladimir's son. He came to the throne in 1019 and led Kiev to even more power. He's known as the Wise because he created important trading alliances by marrying off his daughters to kings and princes of Western Europe. This was actually a very common practice. Many kings would marry their daughters off to create diplomatic relationships with other countries. This is not just a Russian thing. He also did create a legal code and built the first library at Kiev. So education, diplomacy, government, law, all of those things happened under Yaroslav's power. Also, though, he makes a mistake, I think I'm going to point out. He was known as Yaroslav the Wise, but I think he made a major mistake that led to Kiev's decline. The decline actually began with his death in the year 1054, which is also the year that the Great Schism happened between the Roman Catholic Church and the Byzantine Christian Church, but Yaroslav made a critical error by not following the tradition of passing his throne on to his eldest son. What he did is he divided the realm among his several sons, which led to them fighting over the best territories. What other factors led to the decline? While they were having this civil war, fighting over land and territory, the Crusades were going on, so that disrupted trade, and then they were invaded by the Mongols. So next we'll take a look quickly at the Mongol invasions here at Roman numeral number 3. The Mongols were a ferocious group of horsemen coming from Central Asia. In 1200, they began to attack Russian territory. The Mongols were led by a great military warrior named Genghis Khan. He's one of the most feared warriors of all time in world history. The reason why the Mongols were trying to invade Russian territory is mostly for economic issues. They really had some problems with money, and Kiev was becoming very wealthy, and so they were lured in by the wealth there. The Mongols, though, were fierce savages. They would kill and burn. They earned a reputation for ruthless brutality. Now, the original leader, Genghis Khan, died in 1227, but his successors continued conquering the areas that he had started. In 1240, the Mongols actually attacked and demolished Kiev. At this time, they were led by Batu Khan, which was Genghis Khan's grandson. After the fall of Kiev, the Mongols ruled southern Russia for about 200 years. The Mongol Empire's official name was Khanate of the Golden Horde, which stood for Kingdom of the Golden Camp. And I will show you here briefly a map that displays where the Khanate of the Golden Horde existed. So here's Kiev, here's modern Moscow, here's the original city of Novgorod. So this is the area that the Khanate of the Golden Horde controlled. And you can see that they were also controlling Persia, they were controlling Baghdad and a lot of Muslim areas, and also they were controlling Afghanistan and sort of northern India here as well. All right, so next is Mongol rule in Russia, capital letter C. Although they were very fierce, the Mongols did allow the Russians religious freedom and also allowed them to follow their usual customs as long as they didn't rebel. Mongols demanded two things from the Russians. One was absolute obedience, and number two was a massive amount of tribute. Even one of the greatest military men of Russia, Alexander Nevsky, Novgorod's prince and military hero, advised his fellow princes to cooperate with the Mongols. Under Mongol rule, though, Russian ties with the Western Empire broke down and cut off access to new technology and innovation. Roman numeral 4 will focus on how Russia eventually breaks free. The city of Moscow, which is a little bit more to the north of Kiev, was established in the 1100s, and by 1156, it had become a village with a protected log wall. So that log wall served as a defense mechanism. Moscow would become a new power center for Russia. In its early stages, it really was being built underneath the Mongol rule, and the Mongols did not really know much about it. Eventually, Moscow had some powerful princes in rule, and they would challenge Mongol power. During the 1320s, Moscow's Prince Ivan I earned the respect of the Mongols by helping to squash a rebellion that the Russians had led against Mongol rule. Mongols then appointed Ivan tax collector of all Slavic lands and gave him title of Grand Prince. With this title, he became the wealthiest and most popular Russian prince. He was kind of pocketing some of the money that he was supposed to be collecting in taxes, and he eventually earned the nickname of Ivan Moneybags. Ivan gained even more control by getting religious leaders from Kiev to move to Moscow. Ivan and then his successors enlarged their territory in many ways. Some of the tactics they used were land purchases, wars, trickery, and even shrewd marriages. Capital letter C talks about how the Russian Empire emerges. Ivan III eventually became the Prince of Moscow for 43 years, from 1440 to 1505. He ruled, openly challenged Mongol rule, and the Russian version of Caesar is Czar. So when you hear the word Czar, it's kind of the old Roman idea of a Caesar or ruler. In 1480, the Russian and the Mongol armies met at a battle of the Ugra River. They never really fought at Ugra. Both armies simply kind of stared each other down and eventually just turned around and headed home. Since the Mongols left Russia, the Russians used this battle, known as a standoff, as kind of their liberation from Mongol rule. Now, why might the Mongols let this happen? Well, they were undermatched. Fear of Ivan III's army from Moscow was something that they had to consider. Also, where they were about to fight this battle would have been in the dense forest, and knowing that the Mongols are usually soldiers that fight on horseback, this would put them at a disadvantage. Moving in and out through the dense forest would have been a major disadvantage for the Mongols. So that's the story of Russia and how they eventually become free. It was based on the rule of Ivan III, Prince of Moscow. Thank you.